Christy, how you doing today?
I am doing well. How are you?
I am doing well. Thanks so much for joining me. We are going to be diving into an interesting conversation here. Now, you and your family are the subject of a book and a movie, Miracles from Heaven. And it's an incredible story. Your daughter, Annabelle, everything she went through, everything your family went through. And I want people to watch the film and grab the book and read it. But I want to tell that story. And who better to sit down and talk with than you, the person who went through this. So let's start with Annabelle and her illness. I know she had a very severe digestive illness, and I assume life was going normal. And then at some point you realize something is wrong, something is off. Take us through just those beginning steps of realizing that she was sick and sort of that journey.
So when Annabelle was about 4 years old, she started having issues where her stomach would start distending through the day. And by the time it would be about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, we would be getting her ready to go to bed. Her tummy looked like she was 9 months pregnant. And I was explaining to her pediatrician how this kept happening. And he would see her, typically in the mornings, and it would be a little distended. And he would say, well, yeah, it's a little bit distended. And I don't really like what I'm seeing and the sounds and so on and so forth. But it's not, maybe it's gas, maybe it's this. Well, so I brought a picture one day and I said, this is what she looks like by 9 o'clock at night. And he just said, oh my goodness, we need to get you to a gastroenterologist immediately and start investigating. And so that was what we did. And they began to run test after test after test. And then we began to deal with many different diagnoses, lactose intolerance and so on. And they would put her on one medication after another medication. And then eventually they finally said, we need to do an upper GI small bowel follow through, which is just a major scope to see what's going on. And when they did that, they had to give her what's called bowel prep. So she drank the bowel prep like a champ. She was 4.5 years old and she was amazing and drank that bowel prep. And then just all of a sudden she turned totally white and started grabbing her stomach and was saying, Mommy, I'm not okay. I don't feel good. I'm not okay. Well, that story in itself is just a crazy story, but I don't know if you want me to go into it, but.
Well, I want to ask you, I do want you to go into it. And as you're telling me this, I'm imagining what it's like. You have other kids, life is going on, and you have one of the most traumatic things happening, which is an illness that you don't know what it is. You're not understanding it. What was that part like? And then I do want to hear the rest of that, but what was that part like as a parent dealing with that? I would imagine hopelessness of trying to solve this puzzle that doesn't seem solvable in that moment.
Well, at that point, it was terrifying because the doctor was not listening to me and he would not agree that there was something wrong. And so I was frustrated at the people I was working with, the medical people, and I was frustrated with myself because as a mom, you should be able to fix it. Your child should not be in chronic pain consistently. And I was starting to get a little frustrated with God because I'm like, you see this baby, you see her struggling, like, lead us, God, direct us, give us the path. And he was. Eventually, I understand that now, and I could look back, and I was like, oh, yeah.
But you know how many people resonates with, and you see it in the film when you watch Miracles from Heaven, which again is on Pure Flix right now. People can watch it, but you see that frustration. Jennifer Gardner, you're played by Jennifer Gardner, and being a mom and being like, I know there's something wrong with my baby, and then having the doctors kind of deny that and look past that, and at the same time, being a person of faith, right? And going through this and wondering why God. It's sort of that age-old story, right? We see this throughout scripture, asking why in the midst of it. And I love what you just said, that when you look back now, you can see that full picture, right? There's such a lesson there. But anyway, continue. I just wanted to point that out.
So I began to call the nurse that was working for the doctor that gave us the bowel prep. And I'm like, something's very wrong. She is not going to the bathroom anymore. She's not evacuating her bowels, and she started vomiting. The nurse said that's normal. The bowel prep will make them do that. That's common. Anyway, it went through the night. We did take her up to the ER, but that nurse had called ahead and told them that there was a little bit of a dramatic mom coming with a baby. And so when we got there, the ER doctor said, it's the bowel prep, and gave us Zofran and sent us home. So the next morning we went, and they did do the scope, and the doctor came out and said, she's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with her. And I was devastated. And he said, Mom, this is the part where you're supposed to be happy. This is the part where you're supposed to be glad because there's nothing wrong with your child. I was just angry and confused and mad, and I just
felt something was wrong. You still felt that there was something going on.
And I just wanted this monster to have a name so I could specifically pray for the monster to go away. And right now it was just this big, huge elephant that we couldn't even start to take a bite out of. But unfortunately, Annabelle went through that night, and it was a horrific night, and she just writhed in agony and pain. We took her the next morning to the ER, and again, they said, it's the bowel prep. It makes them very sick. We'll give you some Zofran and get you on your way. And I lost it. And I started screaming, is there not something you can do? Is there not some test you can run? I cannot leave here like this. You have to help her. And at that moment, the ER doctor said, okay, Mom, we'll run some tests. And he thought I was a little out of it. He thought I was a little crazy, but they did. And they did an x-ray. And then, I mean, you talk about amazing people, amazing at what they do. They did an x-ray, they did a sonogram. And then the doctor came back in after a few moments. And Annabelle is, like I said, 4.5 years old. And she's laying in my lap, totally lifeless, literally dying. And he came in and put his hand on Kevin's shoulder, and he said, I am so sorry. He said, she is 100% completely obstructed abdominally. The gastrointestinal surgeon is on his way. We're going to do everything we can.
Wow. And what's going through your mind now? You're like, well, clearly I wasn't crazy. You're seeing that. I'm assuming you're relieved in one sense, scared, but relieved in one sense that they finally found what the issue is.
Yes. So then there was this big wave of relief. And then I thought, are you sick? Is there something wrong with you, woman? Like, you wanted this answer, and it's the most horrific answer. Like, then I had all these rush of emotions, like, so this is what you wanted? You wanted them to say that she's dying and that she's got this, to have this horrific surgery. I mean, all these things start going through my head, and I'm like, God, just step in. God, step in and be God and do your thing. And he was not only, he had been in it, but again, it took me a bit to look back and see where his hand was just all over it. And they had to put a nasogastric tube down her right that moment. So Kev held her, and that baby wriggled and cried, and they got the tube down her, and then they whisked her off to surgery. And the surgeon came out and he said, Mom, the obstruction on one side was as big as my fist, and on the other side, it was half the size of my pinky. And they cleared the obstruction, and he said, I think she's going to be okay. And then 9 days later, she still in the hospital. We've not been able to go home, re-obstructed. And they did another surgery. And then 21 days later, we went home. And that was when they began to realize this little girl has pseudo-obstruction motility disorder. And then she actually also had antral hypomotility disorder, which just means that her intestines didn't work and her stomach as a muscle didn't contract synchronically. So she couldn't push food through and out her body. So it would obstruct and cause those massive problems.
I mean, this sounds like it's something that could be life-threatening for anybody going through it, and very serious. You know, in the film, and I don't want to give too much away, but you see her, you know, not being able to eat food normally, right? And it's sort of a tubal feeding.
Yes.
And it's really sort of hard to watch that. And then you imagine as a parent, again, what that's like. So you're going through this process and you keep thinking there's relief at the end of the road. There's relief at the end of the road. And you get to the end of the road and something else kind of happens again. How bad did it get, the illness, before the accident / miracle, which we'll talk about in a moment? But how bad was she and how long did this go on for?
So when that surgery happened, she was 4.5 years old, and it went on until she was 9. And Annabelle's the two things she was diagnosed with, the pseudo obstruction motility disorder and the antral hypomotility disorder, both things are incurable. There is no person on record to date, medically, besides Annabelle, to have ever been healed from those two disorders. And Dr. Samuel Nurko from Boston Children's Hospital is who we ultimately ended up seeing. And we got Annabelle to him, and he told us, I cannot cure her. These are incurable, but I can give her a better quality of life. And so we began to fly to Boston every 4 to 6 weeks for treatments and to see him. He put her on an experimental drug called cisapride. And for a while, he did give her a better quality of life. She was able to eat and drink a little bit by mouth. But then the impactions and the obstructions just got more and more frequent, and her hospitalizations got more and more frequent. And every time she would be hospitalized, they would tube her, and so the last time we went to Boston, we didn't know it was going to be our last time, but it got really bad, to answer your question. And Annabelle was 9. And we were in the hospital, and she looked at me and she said, Mommy, I just want to die. And I want to go to heaven. And I want to be with Jesus where there's no more pain. And as a mom, I just literally right now go back there and I think, I cannot imagine losing you. You're 9 years old, but you know in your mind that the only way to peace is through Jesus.
I can't imagine hearing that from a child. And I see how emotional even you get talking about that now, going back to that moment, because the amount of pain that your child's in, to be saying that to you is immeasurable and unimaginable at the same time. And so she says that to you, and then you flash forward a little bit here to she's outside playing. And again, I don't want to give it all away, but I mean, it's just such a wild story to me. She's outside playing. They're climbing a tree. They're playing on a tree. And this is a tree in your front yard, correct?
Yes. So we live on about 30 acres. And this is a tree. It's about, not quite a quarter mile from the house. So it's considered our front yard, but it's a little far away from
You've got a big front yard. Yeah.
A big front yard.
So,
yeah.
So they're on the tree. The kids are playing, and this accident, which is a bizarre, I mean, this is a very bizarre accident, right? Annabelle falls through a hole in this tree and falls about 3 stories head first, correct, inside into the tree, which you would assume that alone would be a deadly fall. So we could start there.
Yes.
But she doesn't die. And so I don't want to give away. You tell what happens, because it's just an unbelievable story.
It's unbelievable. And that whole day was a total miracle when we reflect back, because she had been laying on the sofa. So we got back from Boston, and Annabelle was, just as you can imagine, upset emotionally and physically, right? So she's on the couch in the fetal position where she always was. Abby, the big sister, the encourager, convinces, I don't know how, Annabelle to come out and play. So that's how she even gets outside, which is crazy, right?
That's a miracle by itself. Right?
Absolute miracle. So not only is she outside playing, she's doing what Annabelle loves more than anything in the world, and that's climbing. Still today, she loves to climb. And so they're climbing, and they get 30 feet in the air, and they're sitting on a branch, and they're just, and I wasn't there. I was in the house doing laundry, but I imagine them getting up on that branch 30 feet in the air, and those sweet girls just talking about life. And the branch begins to give way. And so Abby, in her genius, quick thinking, so they're 7, 9, and 11 at this time. So Annabelle's 9 and Abby's 11. And Abby says, go in that hole and get your weight off the branch, and then I will help you down, because Anna was too weak to get down on her own. But it wasn't a hole, it wasn't a little entrance into the tree. It was literally a hole, and she went inside the hole and fell down 30 feet head first, hit her head 3 times on the way down, and landed on the top of her skull at the base of this hollowed out cottonwood tree, and ultimately was entombed in that tree for about 5 hours.
So obviously, and you know, the way the story goes, your children go to get you. You obviously, this becomes a rescue mission, and you couldn't have imagined what she was going to tell you after what you were going to discern happened after. What was going through your mind during these 5 hours as they're trying to get her out of this tree, and you really have no clue what's going on inside?
I was terrified. I was praying, and I was like texting my dad, and I was texting Kevin's mom, and just prayer warrior friends. My friend Nina Cash, who in the movie is played by Emmy. I just was texting my prayer warriors and just saying, this is where we are. This is what's happening. And the doctor and nurses that were on, they had a helicopter on the grounds on our property that stayed prepared to go at any moment. And they were saying to me, the medical staff, we have never had anybody fall 30 feet and not suffer paralysis or broken bones. And she wasn't responding for a very long time. And they said, at first we didn't even know she was alive. And then the fact that she started responding was a total miracle. And then the fact that she not only responded, and so that's where the movie is a little bit different than real life, because another just complete total miracle is that not only did she wake up and respond, but she assisted in her own rescue.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Assists. We get her up and out. And then the story gets crazier. If it can even get crazier, it gets crazier.
It's one of those stories. And I remember we connected, you know, a few years back. And when I first, you know, heard the story, and then when I saw the movie, I thought to myself, there's so many people looking for evidence of God. And you have these moments and these things that happen, and so many other stories that people haven't shared. And I admire you for sharing it. And we could talk a little bit about that in a bit here of what that takes and how you handle responses that people have and all of that. But so she comes out of the tree. You get her out of the tree. She comes out of the tree. What happens next from that point?
They whisk us off. We go in the helicopter, Annabelle and I, to the hospital. And now mind you, Annabelle was on 10 medications at this time, and she was taking them every 4 hours throughout the day and night. So Annabelle was in the tree about 5 hours. By the time we get her to the ER, and they begin to run test after test, and they're saying, there's got to be something wrong. Like we're going to run one more test. We're going to run one more test. And I am watching Annabelle on that table, and they had a guy who would just sit and hold her head. That was all his job was just to hold her head for hours. And that amazing man sat there and held her head so she wouldn't move. And I watched that baby. Remember, her stomach would get distended where she was like 9 months pregnant. And I sat in that room. She hadn't had any medication at this point for like 9 hours. And I began to watch her stomach slowly deflate. And it just continues to deflate and deflate. Now, it's evening, and she hadn't been eating or drinking, but she was getting IV fluid, but her stomach could continue to go flat, which was not normal. But I thought, well, maybe it's because she hasn't had food or drink. And then the next day, so Kev comes up, he stays the night with her, and I come up the next morning with a bag prepared to stay, because that's what we do. When we get checked in, we stay for days. That's our MO.
You were pros at this point. You kind of knew the process of what it was going to be in the hospital. This was a little different, but you knew what to expect.
I knew. And I walk around the corner with a bag full of goodies. She's sitting, I can hear him talking, and she's sitting on the bed tying her shoes. And I walked in, and she's totally dressed, and he's totally dressed. And I said, what are we doing? And Kevin said, we're getting out of here. And I was like, wait, no. What do you mean getting out of here? And he was like, she's totally fine. There's no reason to stay. The doctor's letting us go. We're hitting the road. And I was still very
Another miracle. Another miracle.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, whatever you say, Dad, I trust you. And we actually had plans to go to Corpus Christi, because Kevin has family that lives there. And he said, I think we still need to go to Corpus, because it was for New Year's after Christmas. It was between Christmas and New Year's. And I was thinking, you have lost your mind, but okay. So in the truck and we're driving down the road headed to Corpus. It had been a long night. So Abby and Adeline are in the back and they're asleep. And it was Kevin driving and Annabelle in the middle and then me on that other side. And we're driving down the road and it's totally quiet. And all of a sudden, that little voice, I still remember it like yesterday. And she said, Mommy, I went to heaven when I was in that tree. And I stopped and I looked at Kevin and he looked at me. And we both literally dared not say a word. Because what do you say to that?
What were you thinking in that moment? Were you thinking, huh? Or you like, what was it? Just shock? I'm fascinated. Like just in that first moment when you heard her say that.
I am ashamed to admit that I thought that she had hit, because she hit her head very hard. And I am ashamed to admit that I was thinking she has a concussion and we missed it. Honestly, that was
that's a natural response though. I mean, that's a normal natural response. I think when your kid says that to you, right? You're thinking, okay, maybe she just is mistaken. Maybe she believes it, but she has it wrong.
Yes. But then she started to go into incredible detail and said that she sat on Jesus's lap and she said, and I told Jesus that I want to stay with you. And he said, I know you do, but you cannot stay. I have plans for you on earth that you cannot fulfill in heaven. And he told me, Mommy, that when the firefighters got me out, there would be nothing wrong with me. Again, in my very limited scope and mind, when I finally found the ability to speak, I said, and Annabelle, praise God, there was nothing wrong with you. I'm still thinking small-minded, short-sighted, nothing wrong with her from the fall, no broken arms, no broken legs. She didn't die, but that's not what he meant.
So, and this is the part, you've got all these little pieces to the puzzle. And I think the big final piece to this puzzle is that this illness that she's dealt with, these two illnesses for years at this point, suddenly you had mentioned you saw her stomach sort of, it's normally distended, it's going down. And it sounds like she wasn't having the symptoms she normally has. So at that point, at what point, I guess, from that conversation in the car, did you realize that she had experienced a healing of some sort?
We got to Corpus Christi, and Kevin's mom is an amazing, amazing godly woman. And I told her what Annabelle said in the truck, and she never missed a beat. She did not act surprised, and she looked at me totally serious and said, that means God's healed her, Christy. She no longer has gastrointestinal issues. And I was like, have you lost your mind? Like,
you're still kind of like, wait, what? What do you mean?
Yes. And she was like, Christy, he's healed her. He answered our prayers. We have all been praying adamantly that God heal her. He has healed her. And she just kept on moving. I mean, like she just kept moving. And I just stood there kind of dumbfounded. And I was thinking, could it be? But as the days went on, we realized she was eating, she was drinking, she was playing, and all these medications she was on, I would forget to give them. Sometimes we literally would watch the clock and could not wait for hour 4 to get here to be able to redose her because she was in so much pain. We would miss doses. And I would be like, oh my word, it's been hours since you've had your medicine. So after 2 weeks, I took her back for her regular check with her gastroenterologist. And this was the one that we saw. So every 4 to 6 weeks, we went to Boston. And in between those, we would go to Austin to see the associate that was connected to the doctor in Boston. And I saw him and we told him everything that happened. And he said, I don't know. That's an amazing story. Let me examine her. He examined her. He said, man, I wish that, I had a tree for all my other patients. She looks amazing. She sounds amazing. And he said, if you are as confident as you seem, Mom, we can start to wean her off some of these numerous, very serious side effects medications that she's on. And that's what we began to do. And Annabelle is on 0 gastrointestinal medications today.
Does she have any symptoms of anything? I mean, was it just sort of from then on, it was done?
It was done. We weaned her off. She eats and drinks and plays and life is totally normal.
That is absolutely unbelievable, but yet believable, right? I mean, it's again, it's that evidence for faith. When we talk about, again, looking for the miracles in life, you have one that obviously was so incredible. You wrote a book about it. It became a movie. And I want to ask a little bit about the movie before we go, but I want to talk to you about your faith, because as a Christian going through this, and you get some glimpses of the faith elements in the movie, obviously, and the church community. And I want to talk about just reactions that people had. But what did this do to your faith? How did the healing impact? Because you were already a Christian going into this. I'm just
Yeah.
curious how it transformed or changed that worldview in any way for you.
So that's where the book and the movie are not very, but they're different. And that's why I love them both dearly. But the book kind of helps explain. I didn't lose my faith as much as I feel like, relayed in the movie that I did. I just had a lot of doubt and anger in my faith. And I think that's okay. I was very frustrated and angry at God. And I remember saying, do you not see this baby girl suffering? Do you not see what I'm seeing? And I would be so angry and frustrated. And I remember one day I was just crying out to God and I was mad. She was hurting and she'd said she wanted to die. And God said, Christy, as much as you love her, she was mine before she was yours. I love her that much more. Do you not think that my heart doesn't ache and I don't groan when you groan? I hear your prayers. And it wasn't audibly, obviously. I'm not crazy. God doesn't speak audibly to me. I don't know what his voice sounds like. But in my soul, I heard that. And I began to understand then, you are with me. You are hearing me. But I still wrestled with things. I still got frustrated. I still, instead of just boldly standing out and standing up, I wearily pushed forward. And now I look back and I see, holy cow, I wish I'd have been so bold. I wish then I would have seen all the miracles going on around me. I wish then I would have seen God moving and his answers and the people in the arms of Christ that were just literally God wrapping himself around us. But unfortunately, it took me looking back to see it. And that's what I tell people today. Don't miss the miracles. I had my head down and I was just getting through it. And I wish then I would have looked up and looked around and just seen God being God. And I feel like it would have given me what I needed then to push through.
So this brought you closer to God, this entire thing. Yeah. That's amazing to hear. How did you deal with, of course, when there's a story like this, you're going to have lots of different opinions. You're going to have people who are elated and it's building their faith, and you're going to have people, and I don't know how much of this was accurate from the film, but you see in the film, there's some scoffers even at church, right? Who say a couple of different things that are a little eyebrow raising. But how did you handle that debate over whether or not this was true? And were you making it up? All these different things that will emerge when these stories come.
So two things, the people in the movie who say the things that they said, and I'll save that for those who watch the movie, those things were actually said to us, not necessarily from people at church, but from people who claim to be godly, church-going, faithful Christians. So those were things said to us by other believers, which now I just see is astounding. Like, how can you be so confused? And how can you not truly understand who God is? So you'll have to watch the movie to understand what I'm talking about. And then for a long time, I struggled with the people who didn't believe. And do you know, who do you think the biggest non-believers were?
I'm going to say that your biggest non-believers would be probably some people in the church. You would probably, some Christians are probably the harshest critics. And I would imagine some people who aren't Christians actually had an easier time believing. Would that be accurate?
Oh, 100% correct. There were many lead pastors in huge churches that came forward and said that it was all lies and that there was no way that it could be true, and encouraged his congregation not to come and not see the movie and not read the book, and that it was all lies and blasphemy. And it just broke my heart when that got back to me, because I thought, I why would you do that? Like, that's crazy. But for a long time I struggled with, what do you say to those who don't believe? And then that question was asked of Annabelle when she was doing the press junkets and stuff. And without missing a beat, she said, "Oh, I say nothing to those people. I know what I lived. I know what I experienced. I know where I am today and what and how I am today. I have nothing to prove. And I just pray, and I know that those people will get it. One day they will get it. And when they get it, they will get it." And I
I
thought,
remember her saying that. I remember her saying that in the interviews that we did. Yes, I do. And I thought it was really powerful for a kid to have that kind of insight.
yes. And I remember from then on, when I was asked that question, I would be like, what she said. Like, what she said. It was so good. So I would
So
just say what Annabelle says and say that.
one last question for you about all this. How have the doctors, so you mentioned the one doctor that you went and saw, how have the doctors at Boston Children's Hospital and all the people who were treating her for all these years, how have they responded to all of this?
Well, very positively. The doctor in Boston, Dr. Samuel Nurko, as you can imagine, his practice has exploded. And we have a very close relationship with him. They have actually created the Annabelle Beam Research, Motility, and Care Fund. Because he believes that when she landed on her head, there was a reset of some sort of her neurological system. And so they're trying to research that and see if this reset of some sort could literally be done physically for all those many, many, many children suffering around the world today. Because it's just a horrible, horrible disorder to live with. So he came forward. I mean, he supported us. He said, yes, what these people are saying is real. It happened. It's true. She was that sick, and she is totally healed and well today. And I can't explain it.
Well, that would be another amazing miracle. That's something to pray for viewers and listeners. As they're doing that research, another miracle that could come out of this story is finding a way to help heal other people, right through what happened. And that's incredible. And I would just add, I've interviewed you and your family numerous times over the years. And, you just mentioned that there are doctors who are on record saying this, that there's a research fund. These are things that are verifiable. When the event happened, there was local news. The event I'm referring to as the tree, that
Yes.
issue. So these are all documented events and happenings. And I think that's an important thing for people to understand and realize, that they can have the questions they want to have, but everything you've just said is actually documented information. And I find that very compelling. And I think even any critics out there, they should find it very compelling as well.
I agree. And
Well,
she's
listen,
18 years old today. I have to say that they are 16, 18, and 21, and they're doing amazing. All three of them we couldn't be more proud.
well, I so appreciate you sharing your story with us today. And anybody who wants to watch the movie Miracles from Heaven can watch it right now on Pure Flix. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.